Hi. Today we're going to tackle the basic past tenses. So away we go. Uh, there are two basic ones. The first one is the simple past, where we add ed to the verb in the base form, unless your verb happens to be irregular, in which case you conjugate the irregular form, which you have already studied. Otherwise, we use the past progressive, and your auxiliary is the past of the verb to be, and then progressive means you're adding ing to your verb. So we'll look at how and why we use them. Simple past, as I said, you add ed to regular verbs, so work becomes worked. Study, if your verb ends in a consonant plus the letter y, you change the y to I and add ed. And if you have a verb like plan, which ends in, it's one syllable and it ends in vowel consonant, then you have to double your consonant. I'll explain why later in class. For irregular verbs, you have to learn them. I'm sure you already have. For negatives with simple past, your auxiliary is going to be the verb do in the past, which becomes did, unless, of course, you're working with the verb to be, but I'll explain that also. And I think there are examples in your book. Next, you're going to conjugate your auxiliary, and then your main verb goes back to the simple form, or what we call the base form. So I saw him. I want to put my auxiliary into the past, negative, so I did not or I didn't, and my verb goes to the base form. I didn't see him. They ate lunch, is my verb is in the affirmative form. To make it negative, I conjugate my auxiliary. They didn't, and then my verb goes back to the base form. Or she didn't, or she worked last night. She didn't work yesterday morning. Can I say she didn't worked? No, it's incorrect. I cannot leave the ed on my verb here because the ed is here in my auxiliary. For most direct information questions, again, you're going to have your auxiliary of did, unless you're working with the verb to be. For example, he was sick. Then I'm going to say, was he sick? It's the verb. If you have the verb to be, you repeat it. Otherwise, your main verb, same thing with negatives. It goes back to the simple form, and we follow this structure to make questions. Direct information questions. Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and object, if it's applicable. So I saw him. My verb here is in the simple past, so I need to put my auxiliary into the past, and my verb goes back to the base form. And then I follow the formula. Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, object. They ate lunch, same idea. My verb here in the affirmative is in the simple past, so I want to make a direct information question. My auxiliary is did, and my verb goes back to the base form. Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, object. What did they eat? Or she worked last night. When did she work? So again, the ed, I take it from my verb, it becomes my auxiliary, and because I can't repeat it twice, I remove it from the verb. We use the simple past to talk about a completed action, so that's one thing, it has to be completed in the past at a specified time, and that there are key words that you can consider to guide you to using the simple past. So things like ago, last, like last week, last month, yesterday, or for example, here I have a specified time in the past. So they met each other 3 months ago. I could ask, when did they meet? They met 3 months ago. She lived in Jasper from 2006 to 2009. I could say, when did she live in Jasper? I have a specified time as my answer, so I use the simple past. I bought a new car last month. That's not true. It's just wishful thinking. Next, we are moving on to our next verb tense, which is the past progressive. I would like for you to think about, through looking at the examples, think about why I might use the past progressive. So I was sleeping when the phone rang. What were you doing last night at 7:30? Where was he going when I saw him? While they were traveling, they got robbed. If you look carefully at these examples, you see we have keywords that will guide you. So the past progressive, or we also call it the past continuous, there are two rules kind of that guide it. It can describe an action in the past in progress at a specific moment. So if I look at this, I could say at 7:30 last night, and it's going to be that 7:30 last night is going to guide the rest of my sentences. I was watching The Fall on Netflix. So at 7:30 you take a picture of me, you come into my house, and I'm watching The Fall. My boyfriend was watching football. My cats were fighting. What were you doing? So at 7:30 last night, if you're taking a picture of me, I assume you're at my house. We also use the past progressive to talk about an action in progress in the past that was stopped or interrupted by another action. So they were mowing the lawn when it started to rain. So imagine they started cutting the grass at their house at 10 o'clock, and at 10:15 the rain began. So they had to stop their action because of the rain. Or he was driving on the highway 10, when he saw a horrible accident. So the action of driving was interrupted by the fact that he saw a horrible accident. Maybe he stopped, we don't know. Conjugation of past progressive is very simple. Your auxiliary is the verb to be in the past. So I was, you were, he was, she was, it was, we were, you were, they were, and ing on your verb. The important thing to remember about any progressive verb, present progressive, past progressive, or any of the progressive structures we're going to study, is that the general rule is that it can be action verbs only. So I think there's a list in your grammar book on page 18 of the most common action verbs that, of course, or the most common verbs that cannot be used in progressive structures. Of course, there are some exceptions. We'll talk about those later. But just as an example, it is incorrect to say I was remembering. You cannot remember as a progressive action because it happens in your head. So to remember will either be in the simple present or simple past or future or something, but not a progressive structure. To make negatives and questions, you conjugate your verb, of course, the verb to be, and add not. So I was not working, or they weren't smoking. And to make the question, you follow the same idea of question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and perhaps an object. So in this one, it's a yes or no question. I don't have a question word. So I start with my auxiliary, were, subject, you, my verb, working. Auxiliary, subject, verb. Or why were they smoking in the house? Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb. So you follow that same structure. So basically that's it. If you have questions, please let me know. There are exercises in your grammar book. Please finish Unit 2, pages 12 to 25, but you do not have to do the last exercise on page 25, which is called Vivid Verbs. So thank you very much, and good luck.